Good morning, this is Ian R. Crane. It's the morning of Tuesday, 27th February 2018. And I opened the door of my caravan this morning, expecting to walk out into about 5 or 6 inches of snow, based on what the media were pumping out yesterday. But as you can see, we've just had a very light dusting. And I hope that wherever you are, that the weather isn't too inclement. But of course, don't forget that your government wants you to believe that this very unseasonal weather, winter, has come from Russia. So yesterday I announced that Theresa May's government was looking to ban plastic straws, but apparently it's been brought to my attention that that's unlikely to happen on the basis that if straws are banned, then Theresa May's government will have nothing to clutch at. So, here we are, back end of winter, quite often the worst part of the winter, but nothing that we can't handle. And you know, why are we here in a field in North Nottinghamshire? Well, because we believe that it is absolutely essential that the unconventional gas industry does not get a foothold in this country. So 5 years since the moratorium was lifted, we still have that situation, and congratulations are very much in order to the people of North Yorkshire for the successful campaign in running off Barclays Bank, trading as Third Energy. The rig left the site yesterday and it was surfed, which caused a delay of a couple of hours or so before the rig could get on its way, and then promptly got stuck on the narrow humpback bridge on the way out of Kirkby Misperton. So this is very much a victory for Frack-free Rydale, for the people of Kirkby Misperton, for the people in North Yorkshire, and for the protectors and everybody else around the country that contributed in one way, shape or form to raising awareness of the fact that Third Energy, or Barclays Bank, trading as Third Energy, were not fit for purpose in any way, shape or form, and particularly not with any financial resilience. A company operating literally on the brink of insolvency. In fact, the only reason it was continuing to trade was because the establishment chose to turn a blind eye to the extremely precarious nature of their accounts, refusing to sanction them for being so late again in submitting their accounts. But then when their accounts were submitted, unfortunately, there were those who buried their head in their hands, and others, of course, who unleashed guffaws of laughter on the basis that surely nobody in their right mind would ever be a director of a company that is operating with a debt level of over 100 times its annual revenue. So, North Yorkshire, a very big battle has been won. And of course, this will not go reported in the national press because the government works very hard to make sure that its tame journalists and its tame editors actually don't put anything in the media which is detrimental to their agenda. They're allowed a little bit of debate every now and again to make it look like they're balanced reporting, but in reality, that's really not the case. And fortunately, more and more people are seeing through that. The BBC is losing licence payers almost as fast as Centrica is losing its retail customers. And people are beginning to realise that it's somewhat ludicrous to pay an outrageous sum of money to have propaganda shoved down your throat. You know, why would you do that? So fortunately, the BBC will continue to struggle as people realise that there is no requirement for them to buy a licence, because there's no requirement for them to watch the BBC. So much else you can watch online now. So cut your aerial, cut your online contacts, and don't go near the BBC. More and more people are reporting that they distrust the BBC. So why watch it? And of course, newsprint. The purchase of newspapers is falling like a stone. In 2010, when David Cameron came to power, the combined readership of the Sun and the Mail was 5.1. Sorry, this is the print runs, 5.1 million. The papers actually claimed that they had a readership of some 15 million between them, based on 2 to 3 people reading every print copy. Bit of an estimate, but hey. Well, that print run of 5.1 million is now down to 2.8 million. Now, I must confess that I regularly do read the Sun and the Mail, because that way I know what 2.8 million gullible people believe to be the gospel truth. So at least I know my start point when I enter into some discussion with them. The good news, of course, is that more and more people are using their powers of discretion and discernment to decide for themselves what the reality of the situation is, or probably is. So they're building a hypothesis based on multiple sources, and that's how they're developing their worldview. And the establishment does not like this. It doesn't want people to be capable of independent thought. So consequently, it's applying whatever methods and tactics it can to censor and restrict the distribution of the alternative media. And as regular viewers of this live stream will know, I have been blocked by Facebook from sharing now for the past 8 days. Yesterday, supposedly, the block was lifted at shortly after 9 o'clock, but within 15 minutes, I was once again blocked. So somebody is either reporting the live stream, and that's causing Facebook to block it, or Facebook have been instructed to keep it blocked. And if you look at the YouTube figures, then it seems that I am permitted to have about 1 to 1.1 thousand viewers on any of the live streams. And after that, the counter just drops. But the numbers don't really matter. They are not relevant, really, other than that, maybe some people see a low number and get, well, that can't be worth watching. But the reality is, those people who are still capable of making independent decisions for themselves can decide whether they watch it or not. And once it's been watched, then it can't be unwatched. So the information is getting out there, and the establishment and the industry know it. They know it fine well. But don't expect to get any help from them in getting the information out there. So if people are becoming capable of independent thought, and they're finding this latent capacity for discretion and discernment, then it has to be shut down. And of course, that's why last week we saw this campaign in the media to get more people on antidepressants. Now, I might have just dismissed that, but literally in the last few days, I've had 2 reports from different ends of the country where people went to see their GP on something completely different. And in both cases, their GP said to them, you don't look too well. Maybe you're a little stressed. Maybe we can recommend a course of antidepressants. And of course, this once again plays right into the hands of the establishment. This is the brave new world. But of course, it's not Soma. In this case, it's PROZAC. And, the UK has one of the highest consumption rates in Europe of SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, otherwise known as antidepressants. And of course, we're getting the kids hooked on this junk earlier and earlier. And the UK, once again, has the highest consumption rate of any European nation of horrendous drugs such as Ritalin, which are given to errant children. Now, pharmacologists don't really understand how Ritalin works, because every now and again you get Professor John Harris of Manchester University, and you can guess whose payroll he's on, pumping out articles saying that Ritalin should be freely available over the counter at colleges and universities because it enhances concentration. Yet, in the developing brain, it has completely the opposite effect. and turns children into zombies. And you know what? If you want to look at common denominators of many homicides and violent events, not just in the US but around the world, but in the US, look at the common denominators of high school shootings. And yes, of course, one common denominator is the availability, apparently, of automatic weapons. But the other common denominator in these cases is that the alleged perpetrators are either on or have recently been on courses of drugs such as Ritalin. And of course, the establishment wants to pump out these drugs because it wants people to live in the alternate reality of psychedelia, pharmacology, creating these artificial drugs that just keep people in a happy state and keep them in sheer ignorance. And of course, the government doesn't want you to know not just what's happening in terms of its agenda to poison the water supply of this country, to make large tracts of agricultural land so toxic that they can't be used for farming. Conspiracy? No. Just take a look at what's happened everywhere else in the world where this industry has established a footprint. And yet sociopaths like Theresa May, all they can do is trot out the palliatives like she did with the the Yorkshire Post last week. And of course, we've seen the outrageous levels of policing against the peaceful protests that have been in place at the well sites wherever the unconventional gas industry tries to establish a footprint. And of course, just a few weeks ago, we saw some 80-odd police officers come down here to the Missing Springs Protection Camp to allegedly recover some pallets for Shep. Now, apparently Shep weren't that bothered, but Notts Police said, well, aren't these your property? There's a whole bunch of them. We had about 100 that were donated by a local pallet company because Shep wouldn't come and pick them up from him. But Shep came down and picked them up from us. So, meanwhile, we see in the media yesterday, this is a reference to South Yorkshire, police need 100 more officers to tackle sex abuse in Rotherham. Well, here we are in Nottinghamshire, where the police are either at Missing Springs well site for Iogas or at the Tinker Lane well site, yet Notts Police singularly fail to investigate the reported historic sex abuse at their county-run children's homes at like Beechwood, where the likes of Melanie Shaw, who's tried to blow the whistle on her experiences at Beechwood, and without any charge, she is now effectively held in solitary confinement in British jails because the establishment do not want the discerning public to realise the magnitude and the extent to which the establishment will go to cover up these crimes, particularly as so many senior figures within the establishment seem to be involved. So, people are beginning to realise that actually, their government doesn't just lie about one thing, it pretty much lies about everything. And, fortunately, there are a few good people within politics, but, they're very much the minority, because it doesn't take long for anybody who enters the political arena, despite going in there, with altruistic motives and with every intention of serving the electorate that put them into those positions, they quickly realise that the only way to survive in that arena is to prostitute their soul. And sadly, they get caught up in this awful game where humanity are simply treated as pawns in their game. And it's I'm all right, Jack. And, the politicians, many of whom are, of course, in the south of England, they never come to the north. They have no idea about the beauty of this part of the country. They have no idea about the contribution that this part of the country makes to British agriculture. And so they're prepared to sacrifice it pretty much en masse, with the exception of the High Pennines. If this government had its way and people just rolled over and didn't object and didn't protest and didn't raise awareness of what's occurring here, then we would already be on the way to something very similar to that in Northern California, or North Texas, or Pennsylvania, or Ohio, or Oklahoma, or Southern Queensland, where the communities in those areas are effectively either bought off, paid large sums of money just to shut up and maybe move away if they possibly can, or they're just ignored. And when any health professional tries to talk about the experience that they have of people coming to them with severe respiratory and circulatory problems, then they are either destroyed in terms of their career because they're demonized and their comments and observations are rubbished, or in the case of Colorado, the state makes it illegal for the doctors to speak out against the unconventional gas industry. So, you know, if you don't want to participate and you don't want to take an interest in the legacy that our generation are leaving the future generations, then, you know, maybe just go away and take your Prozac. But for anybody that is still capable of independent thought, anybody that still has the rudiments of compassionate humanity within them, then please seriously think about what it is that you can do, how you can contribute to shutting this abomination down in the UK. Meanwhile, of course, the unconventional gas industry acts with outrageous arrogance and hubris, and of course none more so than Jim Ratcliffe of INEOS. You know, what's he got on his plate now? He's planning to sue the Scottish Government for putting a moratorium in place, or putting a ban in place effectively, and stating that there will be no fracking in Scotland. He's threatening to sue the National Trust for not allowing his seismic crews to come onto their property to do the seismic testing. He's threatened the North York moors and told them, well, I'm going to drill under the North York moors if you won't let me come onto the moors. He's ridden roughshod over democracy in Rotherham and in Derbyshire by telling the local authorities that they were taking far too long to consider his application to establish well sites in their areas of responsibility. So he's now basically taken it straight to central government and demanded public inquiries, and got the backs up of the people of Derbyshire and Rotherham. And of course he's riding roughshod over democracy by getting Justice Morgan to prostitute himself before the corporations and put in place an injunction against any peaceful protest which causes INEOS any loss or disruption. Well, good luck with that, Justice Morgan, because I hold that ruling in absolute contempt. And anybody who values the fundamental principles of the right to object to an absurd and an obscene government agenda will show you how ridiculous that injunction is. And of course it is being challenged by Joe Boyd and Joe Corrie. And Joe Boyd still needs some help in getting the funding for his legal challenge. So this is the appeal now against the INEOS injunction. So I'll put the link up under this video, or maybe somebody else could do it for me. But Joe Boyd's crowd justice campaign needs your support. You know, the National Trust is certainly probably going to need some support. But I mean, if you feel it appropriate to join the National Trust, I don't think that's particularly cheap. But if you feel it appropriate to join the National Trust, then please make sure that the National Trust understand why it is that you're joining. And even if you're not planning on joining, then please give them a call or drop them an email and let them know that they have your support in their fight to prevent INEOS having open access to National Trust properties around the country. And if you want to find out more about what's going on with INEOS, and of course let's not forget that INEOS is only intending to destroy large tracts of northern England for the benefit of its owner, Jim Ratcliffe, whose personal wealth is listed by Forbes magazine as being in excess of £9 billion. So he's purely looking at mining the gas to reduce the cost of his raw materials, his feedstock for the production of plastics, amongst other things. But tonight is the last in the series of events titled INEOS Fracking and You, being presented by Andy Georgiou of Food and Water Watch, and there may well be a number of other contributors to the event. But that event is at Kilham Village Hall. That's Church Street, Kilham, which is, I believe, just to the northeast of Driffield, and the postcode for the event is YO25 4RG, and I'll put a link to that under this video as well. So if you're anywhere in East or North Yorkshire and the roads are still clear, then please try and get along. Now the doors open at 6:45, the event starts at 7, but once again I anticipate it's going to be an absolutely packed house. So do get along and hear what Andy Georgiou has to say about the appalling track record of INEOS and Jim Ratcliffe, not just here in the UK, but basically wherever they operate. Meanwhile, of course, don't forget that if you are a customer of Centrica or Barclays Bank, then, you know, follow the money, and let's make it very, very clear to these companies that they will lose customers. Maybe that's what they want to do, I don't know, but they will lose custom unless they pull the plug on the support of this toxic industry. Well, so much for a dump of snow coming from Russia. I hope I'm not speaking too soon, but right now the sun's coming out, and you know, this light dusting doesn't look as though it's going to gather any pace. The skies to the east are a beautiful, well, relatively clear blue. We have some interesting sky fracking going on above us, which I will take a photograph of and show you, because these are very, very interesting patterns, not normal flight paths at all. So sky fracking apparently is the order of the day. I guess they were hoping to do it above the layer of snow clouds, but they're not here, so we can see quite clearly what's going on. But most important of all, don't take my or anybody else's word for anything which is projected to you. That's not the intention of what the alternative media is all about. Please do your own research, use multiple sources, and come to your own discernment of what's occurring in the world. And unfortunately, it's not pretty. But whatever you do, resist the temptation to become one of Theresa May's PROZAC nation. Thanks for joining me this morning. Enjoy the day wherever you are. Hopefully, say the weather's not too bad. And for those of you in East and North Yorkshire, go along to the INEOS Fracking and You event at Kilham tonight at 7 o'clock. And I will catch you tomorrow morning at 8:30. Hopefully, without 5 inches of snow under my feet. Take care. See you then.